Today marks exactly 2 years since the Russian invasion of Ukraine, 24th of February 2022. We all remember this day worldwide. The world has changed since then. It's probably fair to say it's changed for the second time after the preceding 2 years of the global pandemic. The first such pandemic to have stopped the world in its tracks for more or less 2 years. I met the original Liban Family Quarry, which was used as the film set for Schindler's List back in 1993. Steven Spielberg and his crew spent 72 days in Kraków shooting this extraordinary film production. This was a very personal project for Steven Spielberg. It wasn't very obvious from the beginning that Spielberg would be the one to direct Schindler's List, because originally Scorsese was involved and he had the rights to the script. He found the script writer for the film. Now, this film was made 30 years ago exactly, or almost exactly. But the story it tells, the story of anti-Semitism, polarization, stigmatization, labeling people based on their ethnicity, it doesn't feel like it's such a remote story when you look at contemporary global politics and the populists and autocratic leaders around the world. We have seen Mariupol, Bucha, Kiev targeting civilians with drones, artillery all over the country, making millions flee and cross the border. Millions of people, millions of refugees would cross a country border in a matter of days and weeks, and not a single semi-permanent or permanent refugee camp was set up in Poland. In Kraków alone, a city of 1 million people more or less, at some point there were 175,000 Ukrainian refugees, and the city felt very, very normal. It was very welcoming and extremely hospitable, with people welcoming many, many thousands of Ukrainians in their private homes. And I remember how many truckloads of first aid, all kinds of goods, necessities, left Kraków in the early days of the Russian invasion in Ukraine. So in that sense, the way Poles responded to this incredible, unprecedented crisis. If you look at places like this, even though it's only a film set from 30 years ago, it reminds you that within a lifetime, people are capable of perpetrating things that are barely imaginable for contemporary Europeans. And yet, it's the living memory of some of your grandparents. They remember it, they saw it, they were freed from forced labor and concentration camps. I've been to this place over the years, I would say dozens of times by now. Now, you may remember the scene in the film when a car is passing along a provisional road made of tombstones. This is the very place. Now, of course, the tombstones are not real. They were made deliberately for the purposes of the film set. You get the idea of what kind of context we are talking about here. And the curious thing about it, every time I come here, it's a very similar sensation, at the same time somehow different. Even though it becomes really colourful, lots of lush greenery in early spring and then into the summer, with a kind of greenery you will not find elsewhere in Kraków. Very thick, very wild. It's kind of even hard to believe that a place that was practically emptied, setting up the forced labour camp here, now is so full and covered with wild greenery, tall trees. It's quite remarkable. All it took is 30 years. Makes you wonder how similar today's world is in many respects, in the sense that you see a lot more prejudice resurfacing, polarization, stigmatization coming from populist politicians around the world, and people who basically behave as if they were atavistically missing the war experience, strange as it sounds, but it's really hard to believe that even in 2024, things like the Russian propaganda around the Ukrainian invasion are even feasible, or that countries like North Korea with en masse propaganda actually work in the sense that you can do this, or even that polarizing figures can play their prejudice cards over and over again. The story of Schindler's List and the Płaszów camp are wartime stories. It somehow feels less distant, less remote, because of what's happening around the world. Back in 1993, it was a very deliberate, careful and difficult decision to make Schindler's List black and white, because this story was meant to be explained and shared, told to the world in black and white, not only because practically all of the original footage of the era was black and white, so all our memories of watching anything ever about Nazi wartime Germany and concentration camps scattered all over Europe is black and white. This is why I think it makes a lot more sense to show this place to you, first and foremost, in its bleak, late winter, early springtime, because it really helps one imagine, even though you will not see any traces, practically any traces of it left on the original site of the Płaszów camp situated above this cliff. Till today itself, Schindler's List remains not only the most important film ever made in Kraków, but one of the most important films in the history of cinematography, really. Now that's the usual temptation, people wanting to have a selfie from this place. And again, look at this. From this location you can see some of the original layout. By original I mean the film set layout for Schindler's List. Rail tracks for trolleys with limestone going all the way to the cliff. Normally you would be surprised what this place looks like. It's actually quite difficult to pass through all those pathways because there is so much lush greenery here in early spring and summer and autumn, and this valley or pit becomes a really picturesque sight. Now even here you can see some of those forced labour camp posts. After all, we are only 2 kilometers away from the Wawel Royal Castle and the UNESCO World Heritage Old Town area in Kraków, so it's in very close proximity to the city centre, and it really looks like a place that is very remote. But for the filmmakers back in 1993, this site presented a lot of advantages. First of all, it had some of that rusty wartime infrastructure for limestone and limestone processing. So it really looked like a proper site for shooting the forced labour camp scenes. So all those incredibly memorable scenes from the film were shot here, including, you will remember, the scenes with Amon Goth shooting straight from the balcony of his villa. I will show you where the villa was situated, because it was demolished right after the completion of principal photography for the film. These are the foundations of the villa set up in this place, not in the original location, but for the purposes of the film, for Amon Goth, the commandant of the Płaszów labour camp. And I'm sure you will recall one of the most memorable scenes in the film when Oskar Schindler, as portrayed by Liam Neeson, is entering the camp in a brand new convertible with white tyres, if I remember correctly. The road paved with tombstones. These are the actual tombstones. Now, of course, I'm not walking on original Jewish tombstones. These are casts made for the purposes of the film.